Part 1: The Dying Light. The galaxy was dying, and everyone knew it. Commander Vance stood at the back of the great chamber on Axis Prime, watching the most powerful beings in known space argue like frightened children. The High Priest waved his 4 arms in rage. The machine ambassador of the Crucible Collective hummed with distressed frequencies. Representatives from 100 species shouted over each other, their translators creating a storm of noise that hurt ears. She did not shout, she watched, she listened, she thought. The unraveling had started 3 years ago in a distant system that nobody important cared about. A strange darkness appeared in empty space. It was not a black hole. It was not a nebula. It was nothing at all in the most terrible sense of the word. Where the darkness touched, things stopped existing, not destroyed, not transformed, simply erased as if they had never been real in the first place. The darkness grew, it spread. It consumed a star, then 2, then entire systems. 17 star systems were gone now. Trillions of lives ended, and the unraveling showed no signs of stopping. The greatest scientists in the galaxy had studied it. They learned nothing useful. The most powerful weapons had been fired into it. The darkness ate them and grew faster. Ancient technologies from dead civilizations had been recovered and tested. Nothing worked. Now the leaders of the Galactic Concord gathered here, in this chamber where treaties had been signed for 10,000 years, and they had no answers, only fear. Was human. Her species had discovered faster-than-light travel only 300 years ago. To the ancient races of the galaxy, humans were bobbies, newcomers, insects who had somehow learned to build starships. The human delegation had no real power here. They were allowed to watch, to listen, to stay quiet in their corner. Had been quiet for 6 hours now. She had watched the proposed prayer to their gods. She had watched the Crucible Collective suggest building a wall of dead ships around the unraveling. She had watched the offer to sacrifice 10 billion of their own workers if it would help. Nothing helped. Everyone knew it. Then the lights went out. Not darkness like a power failure, something else. The air itself seemed to become thick, heavy, hard to breathe. Felt her heart slow down. She felt time itself hesitate, uncertain whether to continue forward. And then it spoke. The voice did not come through her ears. It came through her mind, through her bones, through parts of herself she did not have names for. It was not words, not really. It was meaning, pressed directly into her consciousness like a boot pressing into soft mud. I have WATCHED, the entity said. I have WAITED. Now I offer. The chamber was silent. Even the machine stopped humming. Every being in the room felt the same thing. They were in the presence of something older than their oldest gods, something that had existed before their species were born, something that would exist long after they were dust. The unraveling can be stopped, the entity continued. I possess the key. I will give it freely. Hope sparked in the chamber, saw it in the eyes of in the flickering lights of the collective's ambassador. Salvation, the answer they had prayed for. The price is 1 soul. The hope died. Freely given, fully aware. 1 soul and the key is yours. The High Priest found his voice first. What? What do you mean by soul? What happens to the one who gives it? The entity's response was cold and simple. They will be unwritten, erased from all existence. They will never have been, no memory will remain, no legacy, no echo, as if they never drew breath. Felt the blood drain from her face. Not death, something far worse. To be unmade so completely that even the people who loved you would never remember you existed. Your parents would have no child. Your friends would have no friend. The universe would close around the hole where you used to be, and no one would ever know there had been a hole at all. The chamber erupted into chaos. The scream that this was evil, a trick, a demon's bargain. The Crucible Collective announced that souls did not exist in any measurable form, so the offer was meaningless. They clicked their mandibles in confusion. Other species argued about philosophy, about religion, about what it even meant to have a soul. Remained still. She noticed something the others missed. While everyone shouted and panicked, the entity's attention was focused on one small corner of the chamber, the human corner. Its presence lingered on her delegation like sunlight through a window. It was not hunger she felt in that attention, not threat, something else, something almost like curiosity. Why, she wondered. Why would a being this old, this powerful, care about humanity? Her species was nothing. 300 years of space travel, a handful of colony worlds, no great achievements, no ancient wisdom, just a small group of former apes who had stumbled into the stars. But the entity was watching them, studying them, waiting for something. The argument continued for hours. When the entity finally its presence, fatting like morning fog under hot sun, the chamber was exhausted. No decision had been made. No volunteer had stepped forward. They announced they would consult their holy texts. The Crucible Collective would run simulations. The other species would debate among themselves. Meanwhile, the unraveling continued to grow. 2 more systems would die before the next meeting. Walked back to the human ship alone. Her mind was racing. She kept thinking about that moment of attention from the entity, that strange, ancient curiosity. She thought about her grandmother, who had died when was 12. She remembered standing at the funeral, watching her grandmother's body burn, and asking her mother a question that still haunted her. Where does a person go when they die? Her mother had smiled sadly. Nobody knows, sweetheart. That's what makes it scary, and that's what makes life precious. A soul freely given, fully aware. Did not sleep that night. She sat in her cabin and thought about what it meant to have a soul. She thought about what it meant to lose one. She thought about the 17 systems already dead, the trillions of lives already ended. And she thought about the entity's curiosity. Why humans? What did it see in them? By morning, she had the beginning of an idea. A crazy, stupid, impossible idea. The kind of idea that only a young species would be foolish enough to try. She smiled. Humanity had built its entire history on crazy, stupid, impossible ideas. Maybe it was time for one more. Part 2, The Weight of Existence. 3 weeks passed. 2 more star systems died. Stood before the United Terran Congress in Geneva, Earth, and delivered her report. She told them everything. The entity, the offer, the price, the way it had looked at humans with something that felt almost like hope. The Congress erupted into the same chaos she had witnessed on Axis Prime. Some called the entity a demon. Others called it a god. Some said humanity should refuse the bargain on principle. Others said one life was nothing compared to trillions. What is a soul anyway? Asked a congressman from the Asian Federation. Can we even be sure we have them? Can we be sure we don't? Replied a senator from the Americas. Are we willing to bet everything on that question? The debate went on for days. Philosophers were brought in to explain theories of consciousness. Religious leaders argued about the nature of the afterlife. Scientists admitted they had no way to measure or define what a soul might be. Did not participate in the debates. She spent her time in the archives, reading everything humanity knew about elder entities. There was not much. These beings were rare, and they did not often interact with mortal species, but there were stories, myths, a few documented encounters scattered across the histories of a dozen civilizations. She learned that elder entities did not lie. This was not because they were good or honest. It was because lying was simply beneath them. A human might lie to another human, but would a human bother lying to an ant? The entity's offer was genuine. The price was real. She also learned why the entity might be interested in humanity. They believed in souls as fundamental religious truth. To them, souls were as real as stars. The Crucible Collective believed souls were a primitive superstition. To them, consciousness was nothing but electrical patterns in organic matter. Most species fell into one camp or the other. Humans were different. Humans believed in souls without being able to prove they existed. Humans acted as if every life had infinite value, while also knowing that the universe was vast and cold and did not care about them. They held two opposite ideas in their minds at the same time and functioned anyway. This contradiction was apparently fascinating to beings who had watched the universe for billions of years. Humans were irrational in interesting ways. They hoped without reason. They fought without certainty. They loved without guarantee. To something as old and tired as an elder entity, this might be refreshing. Was still thinking about this when a young man approached her in the archive. His name was Thomas Crane. He was an ensign, barely 25 years old. He had a kind face and sad eyes. He spoke quietly as if he was afraid of being heard. "Commander Vance," he said, "I want to volunteer." Looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" "Because my life is worth less than others." She felt her heart sink. "Explain." Thomas told her his story. He had no family. His parents had died when he was young. He had never married, never had children, never made close friends. He was a good officer, but nothing special. Just another name in another uniform. And 6 months ago, the doctors had found something wrong with his brain. A rare condition. Untreatable. He had maybe a year left to live, probably less. "I'm dying anyway," Thomas said. "I have no one who will mourn me. If I give my soul to save the galaxy, at least my existence will have meant something." Stood up from her chair. She walked to Thomas and put her hands on his shoulders. She looked directly into his sad eyes. "You're wrong," she said. "You're completely wrong." Thomas blinked. "What?" "The entity asked for a soul freely given, fully aware. Do you understand what that means? It means the sacrifice has to cost something. It has to matter. It has to hurt." Her voice was fierce now, burning with a certainty she had not felt until this moment. "If you have nothing to lose, you can't truly give anything. You can only escape. You're not offering sacrifice, Thomas. You're offering surrender. There's a difference." Thomas stepped back, confused. "But the galaxy needs someone to volunteer. The unraveling is still growing. Millions are dying every day." "I know," released his shoulders. "But the answer isn't to find someone whose soul doesn't matter. The answer is to find a better deal." "A better deal with an elder entity," Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Commander, these beings are older than stars. They don't negotiate with species like us." "Maybe they never have," said. "Maybe nobody ever tried." She walked past him, toward the door. Her mind was clear now. The crazy idea she had been nurturing for 3 weeks had finally taken shape. "Commander," Thomas called after her, "what are you going to do?" She stopped at the door and looked back at him. "I'm going to ask questions," she said. "The entity made an offer, but it never explained why. It never told us what it really wants. Everyone has been so busy panicking about the price that nobody thought to ask about the purpose." Thomas stared at her. "You think there's something the entity isn't telling us?" "I think there's always something," said. "And I think the entity is waiting for someone to be smart enough to ask." She left the archive and went to request another audience with the being that held the galaxy's fate in its incomprehensible hands. The Conquered granted her request reluctantly. Many believed she would simply offer her own soul and rob the other species of the chance to find a more important volunteer. They complained that human souls were too young, too small, too thin to satisfy an ancient god. Ignored them all. She was not going to offer her soul. She was going to do something much more dangerous. She was going to have a conversation. On the ship traveling back to Axis Prime, received a message from Thomas Crane. He had requested a transfer to her command. He wanted to help, he said, even if she wouldn't accept his sacrifice. She approved the transfer. Something told her she would need people who understood what it meant to face death without flinching. The galaxy continued to burn. The unraveling continued to grow. But for the first time in 3 weeks, felt something she had almost forgotten. Hoping. Part 3. The Audacity of Ants. The chamber on Axis Prime was cold and quiet when entered. The other delegations had sent observers, but they kept their distance. Nobody wanted to stand too close to the human who was about to bargain with a god. Walked to the center of the room and stood alone. She had prepared no speech. She had practiced no arguments. She was going to improvise, the way humans always did when faced with the impossible. She waited. The entity came slowly this time, like a tide rising in an empty bay. The lights dimmed. The air grew thick. Reality itself seemed to bend around a presence that did not belong in normal space. "You have RETURNED," the entity observed. "Do you bring a soul?" "No," said. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I bring questions." Silence, the kind of silence that stretched across centuries. "Ask." Took a deep breath. "Why do you want a soul at all?" The entity's response felt almost surprised. "Explain your question." "You're older than the galaxy. You exist beyond normal space and time. You don't need food or air or energy like we do. So why do you want a soul? What does it give you?" Another long silence. The observers in the shadows held their breath. Perspective, the entity finally answered. "I have EXISTED 4 ages beyond your comprehension. I have watched GALAXIES form and die. I have seen every possible form of life rise and fall. But I have always watched from outside, never from within." Nodded slowly. "So a soul would let you experience existence the way we experience it?" "Yes, every joy, every sorrow, every moment of fear and wonder and love. To understand what it means to be small and mortal and alive. And you can't just create life to experience. You can't make your own souls. CREATED souls are echoes. Aria Felicitions. A soul must arise naturally, must struggle and choose and grow to have the depth worth EXPERIENCING. I cannot manufacture what I seek. I can only receive it as a gift." His mind was racing. The entity was not evil. It was not cruel. It was lonely. Billions of years of existence, and it had never truly known what life felt like from the inside. "Can I ask one more question?" "Ask." "Why now? Why this offer to this galaxy at this moment? You could have asked for a soul from any dying civilization across all of history. Why wait for the unraveling?" The silence this time was different, heavier, almost uncomfortable. "Because I was waiting for someone to bargain." Felt a chill run down her spine. "What?" "I have made this offer before. 2 other GALAXIES. Other CIVILIZES. They always react the same way. Some refuse out of fear. Some sacrifice their WAKST members. Some argue until it is too late. None have ever QESTIONED the TERMS." The entity's presence shifted, focusing on with terrible intensity. "I have been waiting for a species that would not simply accept or reject. I have been waiting for someone clever enough to ask what I really want." His breath caught in her throat. She had been right. The entity was not just demanding tribute. It was testing, searching, hopping. "And if I offer you something else?" she asked. "Something better than a single soul consumed and forgotten?" "Speak." Straightened her shoulders. This was the moment. Everything depended on the next few sentences. "You want perspective. You want to know what it feels like to be mortal and alive. But eating a soul only gives you that once. One lifetime of memories and then it's over. You're alone again." She continued before her courage could fail. "What if I offered you something that never ends? Not one soul to consume, but a relationship that lasts as long as humanity exists." "Explain." "We assign an ambassador. A human who will speak with you, share experiences with you, tell you stories about what it means to live. Not absorption, communication. Not one soul eaten in silence, but generations of souls choosing to know you, to talk with you, to share their lives with you freely. The entities present swirled like a storm considering which direction to blow. This arrangement favors humanity. You lose nothing. I receive only a fraction of what I asked FOR. Smiled. It was the kind of smile her grandmother used to wear when playing cards. That's true, but here's what I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think you've been waiting billions of years for exactly this kind of offer. You could have demanded souls from any dying species. You didn't. You waited for a crisis big enough that someone would have to get creative. She stepped closer to the center of the entity's attention. I think you want to be bargained with. I think you're hoping someone will find a third option. I think you're not just lonely, you're tired of being a monster in every story. You want to be something else. You want to be a friend. The chamber was absolutely silent. The observers barely dared to breathe. For a long, terrible moment, thought she had miscalculated. The entity could destroy her with a thought. It could withdraw its offer and let the galaxy burn. It could do anything it wanted, and there was nothing she or anyone else could do to stop it. Then the entity laughed. It was not a sound. It was a feeling, reality itself finding something genuinely, unexpectedly funny. The sensation washed through the chamber like warm water and felt tears spring to her eyes without knowing why. You are young, the entity said. Your species is young. In the scale of the universe, you are barely INSECTS. I know, whispered. But you are interesting, INSECTS. You refuse impossible choices. You demand better options. You negotiate with GODS. The entity's presence drew closer, until felt like she was standing inside a star. I accept your offer, human, but I have conditions. Bowed her head, name them. The ambassador must be a true volunteer who understands the weight of the role. They must be willing to carry MY perspective back to your people, to be changed by our relationship. And the compact must be renewed each generation. If humanity ever fails to provide an ambassador, the deal ends. Agreed, said, and I have a condition of my own. Speak. You won't just stop the unraveling. You'll teach us how to stop such things ourselves eventually. You'll share knowledge, not just salvation. We want to be partners, not pets. Another long silence, then. Agreed. Behind, someone started crying. She did not turn to look. She kept her eyes on the impossible presence before her, the ancient being that had just agreed to become something new. The entity spoke one final time before withdrawing. Your species is exactly what the galaxy says you are: young, reckless, insignificant, but you are also what I have been waiting for, stubborn enough to refuse false choices, clever enough to find third paths, brave enough to speak to the darkness as an equal. I look forward to our conversation. The presence faded, the lights returned, reality settled back into its proper shape. Stood alone in the center of the chamber, her legs trembling, her heart pounding, her face wet with tears she did not remember shedding. She had done it, she had actually done it. Behind her the observers began to whisper. The whispers became words. The words became shouts. Within hours the news would spread across the galaxy. A human had negotiated with an elder entity and won. Did not hear any of it. She was thinking about Thomas Crane and about her grandmother and about all the souls who would never have to be unmade. She was thinking about what it meant to be human. Maybe this was why the entity had been watching them all along. Part 4, the compact. The key was not a physical object. When the entity delivered its promise, had expected something she could hold, a device, a weapon, something made of metal or crystal or strange alien matter. Instead, the entity gave humanity knowledge, a way of seeing reality that no mortal species had ever possessed. The unraveling, the entity explained, was a wound in the fabric of existence. Dimensions that should never touch had begun to bleed into each other. The darkness was not evil. It was simply what happened when the walls between realities broke down. The key was a way of perceiving those walls, of understanding them, of healing them. It took months to train enough humans to use the key properly. The process was difficult and strange. Those who learned described it like gaining a new sense, like suddenly being able to see colors that had always existed but had never been visible before. But it worked. Within 6 months, the unraveling stopped growing. Within a year, it began to shrink. The process was slow, but the direction was clear. The galaxy would survive. Spent most of that year handling politics. The galactic conquered was in chaos. Some species praised humanity for saving everyone. Others resented them for succeeding where ancient civilizations had failed. They demanded to know what dark bargain the humans had really made. The Crucible Collective wanted to study the key and copy it for themselves. Answered their questions patiently. She explained the compact over and over again. She made speeches and attended ceremonies and shook hands with beings who had 4 hands or no hands at all. But her mind was always on the second part of the bargain. The ambassador. Thomas Crane had renewed his request. After everything that had happened, he still wanted to be the one. And after everything that had happened, found she could not refuse him again. "You said I was wrong before," Thomas told her in her office on Earth. "You said I was trying to escape instead of sacrifice, but I've thought about it and you were right. I was looking for a way out of my own death. I was trying to make my ending mean something because my life hadn't." He stood straight, his sad eyes clear for the first time since I'd met him. "That's not why I'm volunteering now. I'm volunteering because I understand what this role means. It's not about dying. It's about living. Living as a bridge between humanity and something we can barely comprehend. Living as a translator, a teacher, a friend to a being that has never had a friend." He smiled, and the sadness in his eyes became something else, something warmer. "I'm still dying," he said. "The doctors say I have maybe 8 months left, but that's 8 months I can spend building something that will last forever. That's 8 months where every day matters more than any day I've ever lived." Looked at him for a long time. She saw the young man who had approached her in the archive, lost and looking for meaning. She saw how much he had changed in just a few months. The entity's offer had transformed him even before he accepted it. "You understand that you'll be changed," she said. "The entity will share its perspective with you, and you'll have to carry that perspective back to us. You might not be the same person afterward." "I know," Thomas said. "That's exactly why I want to do it." Stood and extended her hand. "Welcome to the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador Crane." The first meeting between Thomas and the entity happened in the same chamber on Axis Prime where everything had begun. This time, there were no observers, just one human sitting in the center of an empty room, waiting for something ancient and vast to arrive. Watched from a monitoring station nearby. She could not hear what was said, but she could see Thomas's face. She watched the fear in his expression fade. She watched his shoulders relax. She watched him start to talk, his hands moving in the animated way humans had when they were excited about something. The meeting lasted 3 hours. When Thomas emerged, he looked exhausted but happy. "What did you talk about?" asked. Thomas laughed. It was the first time she had ever heard him laugh. "Everything," he said, "and nothing. I told it about Kansas, about the farm where I grew up before my parents died. I told it about the way wheat moves in the wind like waves on a golden ocean. I told it about my grandmother's cooking. She made this bread that always came out a little bit burnt, but we ate it anyway because she was so proud of it." His voice softened. "I told it about a girl I knew in school. I loved her, and I never told her, and now she's married to someone else and has 3 kids and probably doesn't remember my name." He looked at with wonder in his eyes. It listened. This thing that's older than stars, that has watched galaxies die, it listened to me talk about burnt bread and wheat fields and a girl I used to love. And it cared. I could feel it caring. Put her hand on his shoulder. That's exactly what you're there for, Thomas. That's the gift you're giving. No, Thomas said quietly. It's the gift I'm receiving. Over the following months, Thomas met with the entity regularly. The sessions grew longer. The conversations grew deeper. Thomas started keeping a journal, recording everything he learned about the being that humanity had chosen to befriend. The entity had no name that could be spoken. It had no form that could be described, but it had feelings in its own strange way. It had memories that stretched back to the beginning of time itself. It had watched the first stars ignite. It had seen civilizations rise and fall like candles lighting and going out. It had been alone for so long that it had forgotten what company felt like. Thomas taught it what company felt like. He told it jokes that made reality flicker with something like laughter. He shared memories of childhood games and adult regrets. He explained love and loss and the strange comfort of eating ice cream when you're sad. In return, the entity shared glimpses of its own existence. Thomas described these experiences as seeing colors that had no names, hearing music that had no sound. He said it was like learning a language that had no words, difficult and frustrating and beautiful. His health continued to decline. The 8 months the doctors had promised shrank to 6, then 4, but Thomas kept working until the very end. On his final day, visited him in the hospital. He was too weak to speak, but he pressed a data chip into her hand. For the next one, he whispered, everything I learned, everything I wish I'd known at the start. He closed his eyes. Tell it I'm glad I had the chance to be its friend. Thomas Crane died that night. He was the first human to ever know an elder entity as a person. He would not be the last. The entity mourned him in its own way. For 3 days, the chamber on Axis Prime filled with a presence that felt like grief, heavy and slow and aching. The other species did not know what to make of this. An elder entity, sad about the death of a single human. But understood. Thomas had given the entity something it had never had before, not a soul to consume, a friend to miss. The compact was working exactly as she had hoped. Part 5. The Long Conversation. 50 years had passed since the day Vance bargained with a god. The galaxy had changed. The unraveling was a memory now, a scar in the history books that children learned about in school. 17 star systems remained empty, graves of the billions who had died before salvation came. But the wound was closed. The darkness was gone. Humanity had changed too. They were no longer the young species, the newcomers, the insects who had somehow stumbled into space. Now they were the bridge builders, the ones who had spoken to the ancient darkness and found a friend instead of a monster. Human ambassadors were famous throughout the conquered. Young people from every human colony competed for the honor of being considered for the role. Universities offered courses on entity communication. Philosophers wrote endless papers about what the compact meant for understanding consciousness and existence. The entity had changed most of all. Was old now, her hair white, her body slow and tired. But her mind was still sharp as she made her way to Axis Prime for the 50th anniversary celebration of the compact. Her great-granddaughter walked beside her, ready to help if she stumbled. Was 23 years old, brilliant and kind and brave. She had been chosen as the next ambassador, the 15th since Thomas Crane. "Are you nervous?" asked her. Shook her head. "I've been training my whole life for this. I know what to expect." "No, you don't," said gently. "Nobody ever does, but that's part of what makes it special." The ceremony was beautiful. Representatives from 100 species gathered to celebrate humanity's achievement and the ongoing peace it had created. Speeches were given. Awards were presented. Music played. But's mind was elsewhere. When the formal events ended, she slipped away from the crowds and made her way to the chamber where everything had begun. She was not sure the entity would come. It had not been summoned. She was not officially scheduled to meet with it, but something told her it would know she was there. The lights dimmed. The air grew thick. Reality bent around a presence that was both familiar and impossible. "Ureturned," the entity said. Its voice was gentler now than she remembered, softer, more personal. "I wanted to see you one more time," said, "before." She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. "I have been thinking," the entity said, "about what you told me 50 years ago." Smiled. "Which part?" "I said a lot of things. About loneliness, about consumption versus connection. You said that a soul would not fix what was really wrong with me." "I remember." "You were right." The entity's presence shifted, drawing closer. Felt like she was wrapped in something vast and warm, not a physical embrace, but something even more intimate. An embrace of attention, of care. "For billions of years, I thought the answer to my isolation was to absorb others, to take their experiences into myself, to fill the emptiness with consumed lives." The entity paused. "I was wrong. The cure for loneliness is not to eat others. It is to know them, to be known by them, to build something together that is bigger than either of you alone." Felt tears forming in her eyes. "So you're not bored anymore." "I do not know what happiness is. Not truly. But I am no longer bored. I am no longer empty. When I think about the eventual end of all things, the death of the last star, the silence that comes after, I no longer feel indifference." The entity's voice became almost soft. "I will miss the conversation." Laughed, wiping her eyes. "We have a phrase for what you're describing. We call it being alive." A long pause. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath. "Then I am alive," the entity said. "For the first time in all my ages of existence, I am truly alive." It hesitated again, as if gathering courage for something difficult. "Thank you, ELARAVANCE. Thank you for giving me this." Opened her mouth to respond, but found she could not speak. The tears were falling freely now, rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. 50 years ago, she had stood in this same room and gambled everything on a crazy idea. She had believed that even the oldest darkness could be reached, that even the most ancient loneliness could be healed, that friendship was stronger than consumption, and conversation was more valuable than sacrifice. She had been right. "You're welcome," she finally managed. "But I should be thanking you too. You saved us, all of us." "I saved you because you showed me something worth saving. If you had come to me with fear and submission, I would have taken your soul and moved on. But you came with curiosity and courage. You treated me as an equal. No one had ever done that before." The entity's presence began to fade, but slowly, reluctantly. "Your great-granddaughter will be a worthy ambassador. I have watched her. She has your stubbornness, your fire." Laughed again. "She's better than me. They're all better than me now. Each generation learns from the one before. That is what I love about your species. You do not simply exist. You grow, you improve, you become more than you were." The entity was almost gone now, its presence fading like morning mist. "Goodbye, ELARAVANCE. I will remember you forever. Even when the last stars have died and the universe has gone cold, I will still remember the woman who taught me how to be alive." Then it was gone. Stood alone in the empty chamber, her heart full of something she could not name. Pride, grief, joy, love, all mixed together into a single overwhelming emotion. She had been a young officer once, standing at the back of this same room, watching ancient species argue about salvation. She had been nobody, just another human in a universe that did not care about humans. Now she was a legend, the woman who bargained with gods, the bridge builder. But more importantly, she was a friend. She had made a friend out of something that should have been a monster. That was her legacy, not the treaties or the speeches or the awards, the friendship. She turned and walked slowly back to the celebration, met her at the door, concerned. "Grandmother, are you all right?" Smiled and took her great-granddaughter's hand. "I'm perfect," she said. "Now come on, you have an entity to meet." They walked together into the light. 10,000 years later, the galaxy still thrived. The compact remained unbroken, generation after generation. Human ambassadors continued to walk into the space between spaces, sharing their small lives with something vast and ancient and grateful. The other species of the galaxy had developed a saying over the. They used it whenever humans did something unexpected, something impossible, something that changed everything. "Never bet against humanity," they would say. "They'll find a way to befriend the darkness itself and make it laugh." And somewhere beyond the boundaries of normal space, the entity waited eagerly for the next story. The conversation never ended. That was the point. That had always been the point.